So, in case you guys weren't aware, that is how you get a cat to drink a gallon of pickle juice.
They missed that part. I missed that part too. How do you get a cat? Now you just suckered me in. I'm like, I like pickle juice. It's only like I drink a gallon.
It's funny. It's like every time, like I'll make a sandwich or there's anything pickle related on my plate, my children spend the next 30 minutes telling me how stinky and disgusting their dad is.
The kids usually find something to complain about their parents on, right?
Your kids must be young. They don't like pickles yet.
No, and I mean you would assume my wife is 5 years old as well because she can't stand them either. Um, but no, I've got a 7-year-old and I got a 4-year-old that's about to turn 5, and pickles are the devil.
Yeah. Similar,
Jar,
11 and 6, and they don't like it either.
really? Jar of
Yeah.
pickles gets opened in my house. It's gone within 24 hours. Like it's just
Mine.
there's pickle shrapnel everywhere. That's about it.
I'm the only person in my family that eats like more than 5 things on a given day. So my children eat like 3 things, and my wife eats like 5 things.
I don't think we'd intended to start at this. I'd be thinking about just completely riffing about pickles. That was not in the show notes.
But it's frustrating for me because I used to be I've shared this with you, Andy Bushrock. I used to be a personal chef, and there's nothing more frustrating than going to cook dinner for your family and nobody eats anything other than chicken nuggets, peanut butter, and jelly. Like it's infuriating. That predates my prop tech life.
Yeah.
We're gonna short age here and say my parents would just say, well, fine, not eating then. That's what we cooked. You don't like it.
That's what
You're
it's
hungry.
come to. I was like, just go to
Yeah.
bed hungry. You either eat what I cook or you're just going to be hungry.
Yeah.
So for everyone that's funneling in, we're going to give it about 5 after, and then we'll get started here. So hope you're enjoying our nonsensical discussion around food and dietary restrictions.
Little more topical. I just got back from Cretech in New York, and the conversation, Chirag, that we're going to be talking about here was embedded in just about every conversation, which was I got to have more experience for users. I got to, I've got financial pressures on me, left, right, and center. I've got to reposition assets, and the infrastructure was a kind of a key component under all that, with the outcomes of carbon reporting and affordability and how to retrofit buildings, constant topics of discussion. So industry is abuzz with a lot of these things, even given all the pressures nowadays. So I'm kind of excited to kind of get into this because I'm doing it for 2 days, and always nice to have somebody who's got such a breadth and depth of experience keep conversation going. It was an interesting conference. There was a lot of folks. There was a lot of VCs, looking at the prop tech vendors. And there was a lot of owners and developers being very careful how they approach those conversations right now, with almost no commitments to spending any money, right? Lots of, you show me how to save money or make some money, and then I'm listening. But it better be real. If you just say, I'll give you outcomes, then the conversation stopped pretty quickly. So good timing, I think, on our conversation here.
For sure.
Yeah, and on the prop tech side, it is hard, when it's like sensors and things like that it's more theoretical until they see it for real. It's really hard for people to get their head around it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Another buzzword was AI, constantly talking about AI and what the large language models and what they can do for you. And, some interesting use cases. I finally heard some things that sounded more real as opposed to just marketing buzz, right? Some of the bigger, more established folks looking at how they're actually using it for customer service and how to increase response times and, drive leasing renewals and some things like that. Not just, base building stuff and energy related, but, and not promising the world, but like where a large language model can be helpful. That was pretty interesting, actually.
That's funny. So like I was at a Cornet event last night. I was at a BizNow event yesterday, and AI came up in both of them. And the stuff that I heard was just fluffy nonsense, like nothing real about it. And I don't know. I think it may have just been the individuals that were speaking to it, but it was just I haven't heard a whole lot.
Buzzword.
You hear every single conference that you go to, they're AI. Was that what maybe Retcon earlier this year, and there were like
Mhm.
13 panels around generative AI,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, good Lord, guys, come on.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
used to be called automation, they just rebranded it to AI. I mean, it's automation, a lot of it, and they're conflating the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be bastardized for a while before we see any real thing. There are some companies that are doing cool stuff. Don't get me wrong,
Yep.
but there's a whole lot of just fluffy nonsense
Buzzword on top of it.
out
It's
there as well.
Kyle, 2 years ago, we were having this conversation with everybody about digital twins, right?
Yeah,
Which
don't
under the
get me
hood has
started on that. We're getting off topic now. So,
we're going
all
back to the
right.
buzzword webinar that we did already.
Yeah, anyone wants to talk to me about the nonsense and how bastardized digital twin is, hit me up afterwards, slide into my DMs and we'll talk about it. So, all right, we're 5 past hours, so we're gonna get rolling, everyone. So thank you so much for those that have logged on live with us for this episode of IB Thinking About. Today, we're going to be talking about monetizing digital infrastructure in real estate. We're joined by our esteemed colleague, Chirag Patel, who is the Chief Revenue Officer and President of Amicus and Safety Net Access. Chirag, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime I can get someone that I can trade hair tips with, I relish over these
It's also been a
conversations.
theme about IB Thinking About. I feel like I
was-
really should take a razor to my
I
head
was
now.
born for this haircut. Look how
You were
rotten.
born for it? Yeah. No, I was born with a full head of hair, and then I had kids, and it just jumped off my scalp and grew on my chin. Well, Andy and I, we've had the pleasure of being able to collaborate with you and Amicus, and we're doing some very cool things together. But I think for those that have joined us live and those that are going to watch the recording of this who have not had the pleasure of meeting Chirag Patel, why don't you give us a little bit about your background, what you do, and why they should talk to you after we talk to you today?
Okay. Well, I won't take too long because I don't want to bore everybody. But my after graduating college, I was a software engineer, software consultant, and then hardware took off, and I shifted gears rapidly this way to hardware, and deploying networks in public venues was the big thing. This is 20 years ago. Started dabbling. Me and a few colleagues started our own company. It grew rapidly, did that for 15 years. And then we got acquired by Safety Net Access. It wasn't just something we did for financial reasons. We were truly aligned in our goals and the way we do things. It was just a match made in heaven. So it was a no-brainer. We moved over, and I've been here ever since. And the business was majority hospitality, and a couple of years ago we really wanted to go into the other verticals that truly, in our belief, needed a partner like us who knew how to deliver this service better than it was being done. There's a lot of overcharging, margin stacking. We can get into all that later, and we just wanted to show the other verticals how to do this correctly. So that's kind of how this all started. And Amicus was a division that was spun off of Safety Net Access.
Well, let's jump right into that. So Andy and I, we're finding with the way the office market's kind of taking it on the chin. Andy and I find ourselves having more and more conversations in multifamily and some different asset classes that have not necessarily traditionally been IB's primary or core customer, which has been large corporates and office real estate developers and owners and REITs. So we're having a lot more of these conversations in multifamily where this is a very common conversation on how do we monetize digital infrastructure. Some are doing it, some are not doing it, some haven't figured out where to start. But multifamily, this makes perfect sense for. What are the different asset classes where you can take the digital infrastructure and monetize it? What are some of the other verticals that you have found getting success and being able to have this conversation?
Okay, I'll stick to a few. So besides multifamily, I don't know if we're going to put senior living in the same class. It's a little different. So I consider senior living different. There's a lot of opportunity there too, because much like multifamily, it's always been similar where you're moving your loved one in, you're having to call the carrier up. It's already stressful you're dealing with all that stress of having to do all that, and then you have to deal with that. I've heard horror stories. So having a managed, and I don't like to call it managed Wi-Fi because it's so much more. So a managed network solution in the building has made it seamless. They move in, and and one of the things that makes this better is not just the technology of the hardware, but the onboarding process. That's equally, if not more important, of how that works. When somebody signs a lease or signs up to be in a place, how quickly does that communication go out? How easily is it for them to jump on without jumping through a bunch of hoops? So senior living is one. Commercial space is another one. We currently manage a few customers. One of them in particular, who generates over $1.5 million in just revenue off of the network. Yeah, nice. And growing. And it's growing so fast, and there's so much potential there that we have deployed our own sales folks there to help grow it. So because the facility themselves can't get to each of those tenants quick enough, so we've taken on that role because we're incentivized. So those are two big ones. And some of the traditional ones, airports. The way airports work is, yes, it's free for the travelers, but with marketing, ad marketing, you can throw in there. You can generate some huge revenue because advertisers like that demographic, and they'll pay higher dollars for that.
Yeah. Well, and with a lot of the conversations that Andy and I are having on the multifamily, we run into really two flavors of conversation, right? So there's the ground up development, where there's an opportunity for them to take ownership of infrastructure and monetize that infrastructure. Then these companies, especially if they're in an acquisition value add type of structure, or they just acquire their assets as part of their strategy, where they're inheriting whatever agreements, whatever infrastructure. Can you help us understand the differences and the nuances between, what it's like for ground up development and trying to monetize infrastructure versus one that is existing portfolio or existing asset, where there may be contracts that are in place with the internet service providers that they're trying to overcome or trying to figure out what to do with?
Sure. I'll start with the new build. Obviously, there's a lot of control there. For while it's being built, for us to get in there, put the right things in place to make sure that that's going to be successful. Costs are lower. One of the big things is, with the specific kind of solution that you choose, you can actually almost, I've seen it before, you can actually almost have it be a net zero cost. If you put the right kind of network in, you can eliminate IDFs, square footage, electrical work, and you start reducing that off of the build. And with the network solution, it's almost as if the network was free once you eliminate some of those things, right? So those are easy. But one of the problems we do see with new construction is when there's merchant building, right? So there's two kinds of developers. You have your developers who will build and hold to operate, and then you got merchant builders who build just to sell.
Just offload it.
So it's still difficult. So those mistakes, or I wouldn't say mistakes, but the challenges of the brownfields continue to exist. And I don't know how we get rid of this, continue to exist, because they're saying, nah, I don't really want to deal with this. I just want to build it and flip it. And so not everybody, even though it makes sense, not everybody's doing it, because it depends what your agenda is. If you're going to hold it, you're going to definitely invest in it. So we see that as a challenge, and we try to evangelize it as much as we can, that, hey, you can still bring more value. Some people just stuck in their ways, they're going to do it the way they're going to do it. That sooner or later it's going to catch up. Brownfield, it's much more difficult, obviously, but it's possible. The biggest challenge is when you have a garden style apartment, mid-rise, high-rise, those are a piece of cake. Okay. I can get into that in a little bit, but the garden style apartments, which majority of the apartments in the suburbia and rural are going to be garden style.
Yeah.
So they're spread out. There's hardscape, landscapes.
They don't have the pathways for fiber or cable.
Or fiber. And yes, you can do point to point. People talk about, oh, we'll do point to point, or we'll use the old coax. We tend not to go down that road. You're not going to be able to live up to what they're expecting from you. Those mediums just aren't going to do it. And so even though manufacturers come to me and say, hey, we can do this, I don't want to do it. I just don't think we're being fair to our customer and giving them a good product. So just getting fiber under the ground that's already existing can cost hundreds of $1,000s. I'll share something really quick with you that's ironic. One of my good friends who was building an apartment complex about 8 years ago, and we weren't ready then. And I don't think a lot of the products and what we have today were truly ready for managed networks back then. But he came to me and said, hey, I want you to do this. We put the numbers down, and it just wasn't making sense financially. But I did plead with him that when we are ready, you need to be ready. So do me a favor and put some 3-inch, 4-inch, whatever it is, whatever I advise him, conduits from your main clubhouse to these buildings. And it was about a $15,000 cost. And they value engineered it out. And they didn't do it. And I didn't know this until fast forward 8 years later, knocks on my door again and says, hey, I'm ready. So I said, great. Let's show me where those conduits are. And he's like, yeah, they're not there.
Oops.
Yeah, oops. That's right. And so $15,000 we had boring companies come in to check out what it would cost, right? Our lowest bid was $200,000. Yeah. That $15,000 just bit them in the butt. And I have tons of horror stories like that. So the answer is on brownfield, it's just money. There's no challenges. The products, the applications to get a managed network in a brownfield, they're all there. It just costs a lot more money.
Yeah.
It's just, how badly do you want it?
Yeah. This topic of converging networks for capital cost savings is, at least in a lot of our customer base, is pretty well established. I mean, 10 years ago when I was at Cisco, the advanced services team, we were showing owners that very conservatively they could save 30, 40, 50, almost $1 a square foot in construction costs if they got rid of some of the redundancy. And I think what we're talking about now is, instead of having, commercial networks for common spaces, and then the, service providers providing something else for residents in a space, and then other separate feeds out into retail areas and mixed use developments, we're finally really taking this convergence discussion seriously, even talking about using the same digital infrastructure for DAS in some projects, for the small cell infrastructure. So it's really advanced, and this fragmentation problem is still keeping us all employed with how messy vendor networks are, and then the commodity networks and commercial networks, and what residents are using versus someone in retail versus back office and enterprise. So this fragmentation is really what we're talking about trying to get rid of, and then monetizing that infrastructure properly to provide proper oversight, instead of just all these helter-skelter vendor supplied networks that maybe work, maybe don't properly. At top line, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the cost savings are real. And I don't know if I don't want to jump ahead. I mean, if you want me to talk about the monetization and the prospects of that, I can jump into that.
No script. Go for it. Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah. So, basically what we tell our customers on this is that, we're going to get you in the internet business, but really you're just going to be in the revenue business. We'll do the dirty work, right? That goes into it. And when we model this out for our clients, we take it over a 5 year. Like we assume that they're gonna pay for this over 5 years. And most people who understand this, and by the way, let me back up a little bit. At first, when I started presenting this solution to people, I would talk about the technology and what 5 gig, 2. And I was losing everybody. Then I learned real estate. And cap rates and property valuation, and boom, I had the room.
Yep. That's all I care about is money.
Right. Language.
Yeah. So the conversation completely shifted, but we'll model this out for them. And most people have told me the return on the investment for the network is exponentially higher than the actual real estate asset itself. And that's with you paying it back in 5 years versus your normal 20 to 30 years on a building.
Yeah.
So if we were to take that 5 years and spread it out to 10 years on our models, it would look exponentially better than the first exponentially better. So that's where it comes in. And then what happens is I think people discount the IoT portion of what's going to happen in the future. It's not that expensive to deploy, an IoT door. And IoT is such a broad term. Smart lock, smart thermostat, some kind
Leak
of
detection sensor.
yeah.
I mean, those are going to be the most common ones that are going to go in, at least in the
Yeah.
near term, for
And if
sure.
we
So,
if we remove the leak detection, because that's more for the owner's benefit, and we just stick to the ones that the tenant cares about, they'll pay. You know, I put myself in that position. If I'm going to move into a facility where I have that, those are things that I'm used to. I'm going to pay upwards of 50, 60 bucks a month to have that convenience. Most people will. Your return on that's even better than the network. So I think having that foundation laid early on and really understanding what you have at your fingertips, maybe you don't have to do it right away. You can wait a year or two, layer that in, and now you're really bringing in some valuation and real NOI. I mean, you're already bringing NOI already, but that just puts it on overdrive.
yeah.
So where do you start, Chirag? Like, I mean, if you're going to a developer who's building a mixed use property, they've got a little bit of office in it. There's some, you know, multifamily in it. Maybe there's some ground floor retail, and you're talking to them about this concept. And their traditional model would have been, you know, go to a service provider and say, here, can you guys get the building ready for networks? You let each vendor kind of do their thing on the building systems, and you know, the internet for the users is done by the telco, and you kind of that's been the traditional way. Where do you start with them to get down this road besides promising them some cash?
Well, our approach is not just, you know, like I don't want to just worry about the network and my element of it. We really dig in. So the most ideal position to be in is before we've started, right? Before groundbreaking, but we can do it anytime. But before groundbreaking, we grab the plans. I do a discovery call with the customer, right, to figure out all those uses in that building. What are they doing? And then we'll go into, okay, we can provide bandwidth to the commercial spaces, to retail, outdoor spaces, because it will be attractive if your amenity spaces in those buildings, whether it be commercial or residential, will have the same exact coverage as you will in your unit. Those are things that can bring you more value. We'll talk about all that, and we'll model it out. And one of the things that I do in that process is not just build the network. I say, give me your electrical plans. Give them all to me. And a lot of the times we don't just do fiber networks, but we lead with them, because when you lead with a fiber network, you're able to eliminate a lot of electrical, a lot of conduit. And so we start driving, like I said before, we start driving down cost of the other things that they didn't consider. And I think we grab their confidence, because that means we really know what we're doing. And if I'm able to reduce hundreds of thousands of dollars, which we've done for a lot of people on the electrical, the building, the square footage side, the mechanical side, you don't need HVACs everywhere. Then they really see, okay, now my cost of this network is almost nothing. So I'm going to make a lot more money than I thought from day one. So where we start is new construction, before they even start breaking ground. But a lot of times we're an afterthought. Most of the time, they don't get to us quick enough. We're still able to jump in. We can make the best of a bad situation, and we're still able to help them as long as we understand where they are in the process.
Yeah,
we can find a way to get it for them.
It's a pretty similar message for us. You know, when we're talking about this beginning phase, which is the strategy. What are you trying to accomplish? What do you want to offer? What are the market conditions? What were you planning to do if we didn't show up, right? Then look at the design, look for those opportunities to right size, to air quotes future proof, you know, use the right infrastructure. Don't be sticking coax in a modern building sort of thing, you know, the whole fiber to the edge type strategy. Then look at assembling the solutions to achieve the strategy. And maybe that's gear, maybe that's software, maybe that's services. You know, in our smart building world, that might be a particular platform to use, and take advantage of this robust infrastructure. And this is where, to your point earlier, it depends on what they're going to do with it. Are they going to flip it, or are they going to hold it? So now are they more worried about, how do I run this? And I don't have, for example, cybersecurity expertise in house, or I can't manage, you know, when my new tenant moves in and needs internet the next day. I can't handle that. So I need to know who can do that turnkey for me as part of these services. And so we start layering in all these things, and you can see how it pulls the thread right from what did they want to achieve in the development to this is now running, and they have experts running it in exchange for, you know, providing that value to the end users.
Yeah, and that's just as important. So if I go back to the building them the solution, we even do a phase approach, right? So I mean, every project goes over budget without fail, right? So we always have some sort of contingency plan. So one of the things we propose lately, because everything's going over budget, is why don't we do a phased approach? So the one thing we don't want to have to go back and do later is the cabling. So what we'll say is, okay, the foundation that we have to lay is the cabling. Let's get a cable in every room. But really, if we're not dealing with block construction or concrete, and we're just dealing with studs and drywall, we can probably put an access point in every other unit and still achieve great signal, right? And then there's always, obviously there's nuances. If there's 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, we got to put a few in. But let's just, for this purpose, let's say we only need wireless access point in 60 to 70% of the units to achieve coverage everywhere. But then you have this wild card of some people may want to have a hardwired connection because they're gamers. Well, 60 or 70% of day one are going to have it. Maybe we do that. Maybe we say we will reduce your cost when you open the doors day one by 30%, but the cable's there. We're all set. So if somebody does move into a unit where there's only a cable, but not an access point or some extra ports, we'll roll a truck and put that in, but we'll budget that for year 2. When your occupancy is actually going up and then your cash flowing, we'll come back and finish off the project and it's not impactful to you. So we do try to provide creative solutions, not just here, this is the way it is. It's an easy button. We want to make sure that we're helping people succeed. I lost your audio.
You lost your audio there, Andy. There
sneeze,
we go.
Sneeze button.
Every Zoom call has to happen at least one time.
I know. Pretty similar for us, Chirag, that, and a lot of times when customers are trying to figure out, where do they right size their spend, a lot of times we'll be advocating to delay some of those decisions till you have to, right? Mm-hmm. Especially on projects that are 3, 4, 5 years out sometimes before you finish. For example, don't pick the type of access point yet. Like, let's wait, right? There's a couple of, there's options, there's good things available, maybe the right deal at the right time. But those delay some of those decisions and scale them for when you need them instead of committing too early and maybe not having some of that technology flexibility. That's pretty common when we're in, development support role and procurement assist, if you will, and getting into that construction admin role.
Yep.
So similar approach, I think. So if we're really talking about letting the landlord, and I'm trying not to giggle to myself as I try and develop or deliver this without screwing it up, Kyle. But we're really talking about the owner being able to kind of monetize the Wi-Fi and the networks, in effect becoming a landlord. Did it hit? Not land. No, it didn't work. It didn't work.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that went over a lot of people's heads.
Okay, I got it.
It was bad. You can't capitalize LAN when you say it. I tried. All right.
You just have to be very careful with that enunciation, man.
It didn't work. I tried. I'm kind of giggling inside, but I'm also cringing at how many people just heard me screw that up. Anyway.
Well, I'm pretty sure everyone who just dialed in is like, what the hell is he talking about?
Gotta try.
Was that a joke?
There's a reason I'm not in comedy. Yeah. Don't quit my day job, right? Yeah.
Well, look, why don't we pivot over into our poll for this episode? For everyone who's logged on and wasn't completely thrown off by Andy's bad joke.
Landlord.
Yeah. I'm going to throw the poll up, give us a little bit of time to be able to answer that for everyone. There's only one today. I'm launching that now.
We should have had the Jerry Maguire image up.
Show me the money.
Everybody's going for that right away. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So are you leveraging your digital infrastructure as a revenue generator for your properties today?
There's probably some pretty common. There's some common elements there, right? Like, I mean, if you've got digital signage in the elevator, obviously lots of folks have been selling advertising revenue there, advertising space there. I mean, going to an average, office tower in a downtown core, that's been going on for quite some time. But I think what we've been talking about with Chirag is a lot more ubiquitous on all of that infrastructure, right? Of providing that service level with, guaranteed service level, Chirag with experts on the back end that you can call if you need to get, you got an issue of getting your printer onto the Wi-Fi if you're a resident. Or if you're a tenant and you need a drop into a newly created boardroom, these are our customers want to have a single person to call to do all this stuff. and they don't want to be thinking that the building systems are on a separate network and the cybersecurity of that is handled separately. And what about the remote access for technicians? And you kind of want all of this digital infrastructure handled by in one common way. I mean, that really what it comes down to. Try to have one throat to choke. We don't like getting choked, but we like being responsible for these things when you got the expertise, right?
Yes.
And then this infrastructure is flexible for more things in the future. So the idea is don't give away that infrastructure. Don't let somebody else do it. This is something that should be a core part of your business because it's so expected by, Chirag, we were talking about this off the top, almost every vertical. This connectivity is an expectation, whether it's for critical building systems and ventilation and the elevators, or it's just Wi-Fi in a unit. Just you're on Reddit and goofing around.
Yeah, and I think your company talks about this a lot. It's a utility. I was viewed as an amenity for many years. Some people still view it that way, but it's probably one of the most important utilities. I mean, I think there's a poll in the hospitality industry where, you know, having internet connection in your room was a higher priority than hot water and running water. Nobody cares. Like I can take a shower tomorrow, but I need my internet now.
That'd be my kids clicking that last option. Internet is a fundamental right, and don't you dare. Wi-Fi is free, right? Like,
Yeah,
not quite, but
we only had one entitled person on today's episode.
Both of my boys would have clicked to that one. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and end this and share the results with the group. But it looks like, I mean, for those that are on here, I mean, and I kind of see this whenever I'm starting conversations, it's kind of hit or miss. You know, you have some that are already on top of this, that are already down the path of monetizing their digital infrastructure, taking ownership of it. Others are just trying to figure out who's going to manage it for them because they don't want to do it themselves. They don't want to get the phone call at 2 a.m. in the morning. You know, Chirag, from your perspective, I mean, how often are you seeing developers not doing this as just table stakes for their developments?
Yeah, for merchant. So let's I'll stick to a specific bucket there. You know, for merchant developers specifically, I would say 50%, and it boggles my mind. But I get it, right? That's not their business.
Old model. They're comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, forget about the internet. They're cutting corners everywhere. Sorry if I offended people, but yeah, they're just, how do I meet minimum code and get this thing flipped? So we're just not going to get through to them as much as no matter how much I try.
But if quick question, if they own, if the developer, that's the merchant developer that's just going to flip it, right? If they contract in and they own the easement, they own the digital infrastructure, is that not something that can roll into the sale of the asset as an additional line item? Is there no value in that? Like, what does that look like?
There is value. There is value. I just, you know, some of them just don't want to take the time to understand it. You know, it does confuse me. We've tried. I don't think it'll be like that forever. With anything, it just takes a few cycles for it to become more mainstream. So I don't think and that's why we're here, right? To make this more mainstream so people understand the value. We're not going to single-handedly do that at Amicus. So folks like you and our competitors, quite frankly, will help get everybody there. But for developers who understand the value and want to offer more technologies and converge, I would say 90% of them are wanting to do it this way and not just say, yeah, we'll just let the carriers put it in and move on.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we can't drag the bottom end of the market all the way, but you know, our clients are typically at the top end that are looking for ways to innovate. They're looking for ways to get ahead of those folks who are laggards. And if you can show them that, especially, you know, someone in asset management or someone in development who's incentivized on this, that there is some income, and an ancillary income stream is usually the word that's used, that they're listening, you know, because they're looking for these ways to augment, you know, the income of the property.
Yeah. So for what you said earlier, Kyle, we've done this for certain people where the owner of the asset will also create another LLC that own the digital asset. As you were saying, it's been done. And when they sell the property, that revenue stream still comes because they actually own the digital part of it.
Right.
And they're still, yeah. So that is a cool model, and there are people doing it. Some people are just, you know, like I said, they're old school and they're like, I don't deal with that. And I always try to tell them that's an annuity. You're building an annuity for yourself. You did it during construction. Why not?
Well, and that's where my head goes, is like, why if it's not going to increase the NOI, if it's going to give me a multiplier on the sale of the asset, why would I not do that?
Because it can take the NOI. Well, I'll tell you why. Because to truly see the benefit of the multiplier, you have to get fully leased up. There is that, right? So if I'm going to sell it month 2, it does take a while for me to have the impact, because at month 2, I'm only having, let's say I'm only 20% occupied when I flip it, then that's it. That's the only NOI I'm showing. I'm not showing the 100% NOI. So once we get there, so it just depends in what part of the cycle those people are flipping it. We do have some merchant developers who flip it on day 366. They want to go for it because it makes sense. They're going to be fully leased up by that time, and they're going to make a whole lot more money when they flip it.
Things have come a long way. I can remember having conversations back in, my Cisco days where, talking about network convergence, and was told by multiple developers if it costs more than the piece of plywood that they put, in telecom closet, they weren't interested. This is very different, this conversation, because this is not just pure cost that you're going to them with. You're going to them with a different model, which is pretty appealing. So you've got the, ideally some construction cost savings to rationalize this complex infrastructure, which is not getting any simpler as we add more systems and more, sensors and more edge devices. These networks are not going away. So let's do it right up front. Then let's look at how do we provide the services to achieve the strategy of the property? What amenities are we going to have? And the digital amenities are almost always included in these properties. Otherwise, they might not be competitive in a lot of markets. And let's make sure it's supportable. And there's going to be people who will pay for some of these amenities. So now let's make sure we can capture some of that revenue for the landlord, not just give it away to service providers.
Yeah, and to talk about supportable, right? So if we talk about being supportable, we do tend to stay away from proprietary products, and I would urge owners to stay away from that. There's many providers who can say, "Oh, look, I got my own secret sauce here," but if they're not doing a good job for you, that secret sauce is handcuffs. Those are handcuffs. They're going to keep you with them forever, because if you try to move to a different provider, they're going to say, "I've never even seen this before. I have no idea what this is."
You mean on hardware, Chirag? On
hardware, on
network
hardware.
gear? Yeah,
network gear. Software. You can, the solution, the automation, the workflows. You can always back that into any kind of hardware. But when you have hardware that's white labeled and it's very proprietary, it does make for a difficult situation if the provider's not coming through for you.
Well, that typically falls into like when we're playing owner's rep for a developer or an owner, and we're creating the standards for the technology that goes into any of their projects, right? We're always making sure that those boxes are checked, right? We want to make sure it's open. We want to make sure that it's interoperable. We want to make sure that data is portable, but we want to make sure that there's not a bunch of proprietary stuff in there that's going to put them in some sort of vendor lock or some sort of uncomfortable situation should they want to pivot, 2, 3, 4 years down the road.
Yep. And one more thing to add, another way to shift the mindset of the old way of doing it is, I think I would equate it to Carfax, like Carfax for when you buy cars, and all the histories there, and people look at it and go, "Oh, I'm not buying this car. It's been in 3 wrecks." Well, if the community that's buying these assets were to have the same mindset and say, "Hey, listen, developers, we're not going to buy assets that are done the wrong way." I think that is the quickest way to shift this. But for a while, when money was cheaper, it was just, hey, it was a bidding war, right? So it was kind of easy for them to get away with it. But now I think as money's a little tighter and people are really paying attention to how they're building, I think the folks that are in line to buy these assets need to demand that this stuff be done the right way.
Yeah.
There's
All
definitely
right,
lots of opportunity in this industry, right? Because it can still be pretty stodgy and not politically, but very conservative in technology adoption. I actually heard it at Cretech this week. An executive talking about the challenges of applying new technology, and he was actually given an anecdote that said he went into a car dealership and he hadn't actually had a car in ages, so he didn't have an insurance slip ready to go for buying the car. So as he was going through this ancient experience with the car dealer of negotiate with the rep and then go to the manager and they try and sell you the rust proofing or whatever, and they're like, "Where's your car insurance slip?" So he pulled out his phone and he went on Geico and got his pink slip and went, here's my insurance. I got coverage right now. But he was like, just the difference between those two was just like night and day. So it's like we have all these technologies available, we have these innovative solutions, but we still have like the car buying process in some cases, right? In the development world and in bricks and mortar. So that's what I think we're trying to change, is use the technology, maybe not every buzzword like AI and digital twins, right, Kyle? But try and show a different model that makes more sense, and that it's just better for the end user, but that it is, got financial incentives so people care. People funding it care.
All right, gents. Well, we're coming up here close to the end of time. I want to open up to open Q&A for anyone who's here with us live, and see if anyone has any questions for Andy, Chirag, myself. So anyone who's live with us has a question, if you want to throw that up into the Q&A, and we'll field a couple of questions before we wrap up.
I'm expecting someone to put that Jerry Maguire gif in there of "show me the money." I feel let down if nobody does. Might be on my phone. I should have prepped another dad joke, maybe one that actually didn't land. Oh, I just used land again. Right. Land so perfectly flat.
So we got a question, Chirag, if someone wants to get in contact with you or your team, what's the best way to do it? I'm going to be sharing a slide that's going to have contact information in a moment, but what's the best way to get in touch with you guys?
Our website, amicusnetworks.com, and you will share my info. So if they want to email me after this, I will get them to the right person inside our organization. Happy to have a conversation.
Bang. Softball for you, Chirag.
No.
I'm interested. Can we talk?
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming through. So
either I bored everybody to death or I did a really good job.
That's knocked it out of the park, Chirag.
We're smiling.
All right, everyone. So if you want to get in contact with Chirag, all of his information is here for Amicus Networks. So feel free to reach out to him. Andy and I can get you in contact with them as well. If you're interested in chatting with either Andy or myself from the IB side, definitely would welcome that also. But for those of you that tuned in with us live today, we really appreciate you joining us. Chirag, hey, awesome to talk to you as always. Thank you so much for your time today.
Likewise.
All right, and everyone, we've got these episodes happening typically the third Thursday of every month. Stay tuned as we look to announce what our next episode is going to be here in the coming week. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Chirag. Thanks, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.